Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hi, it's Michael Smerconish.
Welcome to Book Club with Michael Smerconish, a collection of Michael's favorite interviews with authors from the last 30 years through today, on the air, on radio.
What sets my book club apart is that I actually read the books.
Book Club is now in session.
The case of Adnan Syed, made famous by the Serial podcast that has a bazillion downloads, is now the subject of a brand new book. It's titled Adnan's Story, The Search for Truth and Justice After Serial. It's written by a close and long-standing friend of Adnan Syed, Rabia Chaudry, who joins me now. Rabia, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's a hard conversation to have with you because I'm not sure what I should expect of my own audience in terms of their familiarity with the subject. So I want to make sure that we go through some of the basics. I'm totally into it. I listened to the podcast. I've read your book. I was engrossed in your book. I had something very funny happen to me, which is that 2 nights ago, I was in a bookstore in Florida, one of the few remaining Barnes and Nobles, and I was walking through the nonfiction true crime section looking for a particular book, not yours because I already had a copy. And lo and behold, in a display case, they had a brand new book by Asia McClain. I didn't know that she'd written a book as well. So,
oh, yeah. That's been out for a couple of months, actually.
Had no idea. So the subject is very much in play. But I have a preliminary total non sequitur question for you, okay?
Okay.
Your bio, as presented to me from St. Martin's Press, says Rabia Chaudry is an attorney, president of the Safe Nation Collaborative, and National Security Fellow at the New America Foundation. I have the highest regard for Peter Bergen. Is he not also associated with the New America Foundation?
Peter is my boss. Yep, I work with Peter.
Wow, what a 1 degree of separation then.
He's fantastic, yep.
So on a day-to-day basis, when you're not fighting for the name of your good friend Adnan Syed, what is it that you do for a living?
Well, actually, so that bio is a little bit dated, which is interesting. I've been a fellow with the New America Foundation for about 3.5 years now, but my project with them ended last summer, and I told Peter, I said, I need some time off to work on this case. This March, I began a fellowship at the U.S. Institute of Peace, which involves international research on basically religion and terrorism, and I'm doing that research in Pakistan and Sri Lanka. So, but I still do work with Peter. We meet every so often. We were at a White House meeting last week. But, you know, much of my work in the policy field that I've been doing and policy and research field that I've been doing for the last 5 years involves the field of CVE, which is countering violent extremism. It's understanding how people get involved in extremist ideologies, how they're recruited, what resonates with them, how do you stop it, things of that sort.
You've known Adnan Syed for a long time. How so?
I met him when he befriended my brother. They became friends when they were about 13 years old, and they met at a local mosque playing basketball. And then he would just come over to the house. His parents lived in the same subdivision as my parents back then and today as well. And I know his parents as well.
Adnan Syed today is behind bars, having been convicted for the murder of his former girlfriend, Hae Min Lee. You are his chief proponent. I mean, but for you, there'd be no Serial podcast. In the book, Adnan's Story, you reproduce the email that you first sent to Sarah Koenig to try and entice her to take an interest in this story.
Yeah, that's true. I have been a public advocate for him for a while now.
How come? I mean, what was it from the get-go that caused you to say he couldn't have done it?
Well, you know, number one, I know him. You know, I've known him since he's 13 years old. The community knows him. He's just the most non-confrontational, like just the sweetest guy, the mildest mannered person ever. Beyond that, he's maintained his innocence from the beginning. He was bewildered by this entire thing, as were the rest of us. And then in the trial, we realized that there was no physical evidence. The evidence they gathered, like the hairs they found on her body and things of that sort, the soil samples they took, nothing matched him. It all came down to this one witness, and that witness, and these cell phone records that they used to corroborate that witness's statement. But it ended up it was the other way around. The witness, matched his testimony to the cell phone records. And as a witness whose statements changed, he was very unreliable. And many of us have thought that maybe he was responsible for Hae's death and he was pinning it on Adnan or something. But, I just believed that he was innocent. And the case didn't make any sense. And there was just no evidence to prove, to convince me otherwise.
You acknowledge in the book there's nothing that Rabia Chaudry can point to that says, see, here it is. This is the proof that he did not do it.
I don't know. I personally think that the lividity evidence, the evidence of the autopsy evidence, is very good proof that the way she had to have died and been buried and what happened to her after she left school, that Adnan couldn't have done it. She had to have been killed somewhere, laid out flat for 8 to 12 hours, and gone back and buried later. Like, what? How was he managing all of this? Well, he's going to track practice, and then he's at the mosque a couple hours later. Like, how does that fit in with anything that's ever been offered before by the state or Jay? And so I think the medical evidence completely contradicts what the state narrative is, unless they completely reframe it and said, okay, no, Adnan killed her in some private place and he laid her out. I mean, the whole body in the trunk, it never happened.
Okay, be fair, and from your perspective, this will be the equivalent of playing devil's advocate, but give my audience the 60-second summary of the state case against your good friend.
The 60-second summary is that the state says that Hae Min Lee broke up with Adnan. He was heartbroken, and he decided he was going to kill her, so that he somehow followed her out of school one day and killed her, went back to track practice half an hour later, left her body in the trunk of her car, and then a few hours later buried her with the help of a man named Jay Wiles, who then testified against him.
And the state case further would say that his motivation in killing her was there was always tension in the relationship brought about by their different points of origin, the fact that he was Muslim, that he should not have been dating, that there was a homecoming dance where he was embarrassed by the appearance of one of his parents because they knew that he was dating this woman, not only dating her, but that she was Korean, that they almost wanted to cast this, and perhaps, Rabia, you're going to tell me they did cast this as an honor killing of sorts.
Oh, they did. They absolutely did. His religion and ethnicity were very much part of the state's case and motive. It came up time and time again, from the bail hearing to the first trial to the second trial to the documents we found in the prosecution files. So that they very much felt that he was motivated by religion. It was a very odd argument for those of us who were witnessing this, because we thought, if you are a religious Muslim, you're not smoking pot, drinking, and dating. Like, you can't have it both ways. On top of which, you're making the presumption that if you are a religious Muslim, for some reason, you can, kill somebody. It was so preposterous, and it is still reprehensible. And the interesting thing now is that the state now is dialing back. And in the last couple of years, their statements have been like, no, it was never about his religion and ethnicity. It was just a routine domestic violence crime. Well, why did you bring it up dozens and dozens of times then?
Okay, but I guess my point is that I'm still trying, because I'll give you ample opportunity to pick it apart, but I want the audience to know that from the state's perspective, they viewed a motive as being relationship gone bad, a domestic relationship that had gone bad, and a religious influence that would perhaps give him the impetus for wanting to do something about that.
Honor besmirched.
The witness, right, okay, the witness is one that you can easily pick apart, but then again, what kind of a witness are you going to find if it's someone who was involved in the disposal of a murder victim? You're not going to be able to get a choir boy for that. He was a drug dealer known to Adnan because Adnan presumably bought his pot from him, correct?
Yeah, I mean, look, he was the kind of drug dealer, if you want to call Jay Wiles a drug dealer, who had to run around looking for, dime bags of weed. You're not a drug dealer. He was just a kid who got stuck in something. He was threatened by the prosecutor. They said, we're either going to charge you with the murder or Adnan with the murder. There's a reason Jay's stories keep changing. It's because he didn't know what happened. He was fed the information. His stories kept changing to match as the police kept investigating. They found new information. Suddenly, Jay's stories changed. Now, in his most recent interview just last year, he suddenly says now, I don't know if she was killed at Best Buy. I don't know what happened at Best Buy. I was told she was killed at Best Buy. I was never at the burial. I didn't see the body. Nothing happened at 7 p.m. She was buried at midnight. I mean, so it's one thing to say you have a witness who might be slightly whose character or maybe they have a background that's questionable, but you still have to have a witness whose statements are consistent. Like,
great. I mean, great inconsistencies in Jay's statements. There's no doubt about that. I'm simply making the point that if I kill someone and I need to dispose of a body, I'm not going to be able to go to my straight arrow friends. I'm going to have to go to somebody who walks that side of the aisle to get me to participate. Therefore, the fact that Jay's got issues, to me as an attorney, is not in and of itself surprising.
I think that is a really crazy argument to make, and I'll tell you why. Because Jay and Adnan barely knew each other. They literally just Jay was dating one of Adnan's close friends, Stephanie, and Adnan was kind of forced to hang out with him, and it was kind of a marriage of convenience because he got him pot, and that was it. But they were not friends. He's the last person Adnan would go to.
Okay, but the day of the murder, the 13th, whose car is Jay driving?
No, but Jay borrowed everybody's car, and that's the thing. Jay would go use his car and get weed. I mean, like, this was like not unknown. And Adnan also lent his car to a lot of people. I mean, if you read some of the trial transcript, the attorney says, "How many people's cars did you borrow?" Jay borrowed everybody's car, and so Adnan was the kind of guy who'd be like, "Yeah, you can use it while I'm at school." And what happened initially was that the police did not realize that Adnan didn't have his car. They actually thought he had his car and phone, and they thought he followed Hae out of school with it. It wasn't until they started talking to the people that were on the call list, and Jay Wiles was their first call that morning, and they were like, "Oh crap, Jay had the car." So there's no way they could get around not involving him.
But the connection to the car is through Adnan, right? It's not as if Jay had a relationship with Hae Min Lee.
Well, no, Jay knew Hae, but I don't understand why would that matter? If Jay didn't have the car and Adnan had the car, the state's theory of the case would be that Adnan had the car, so he followed her out of school. They just somehow had to figure out how Adnan got to Hae, and they didn't care what kind of story they came up with.
All right, and how about these words? "I'm going to kill."
Yeah.
What caught their eye was the words written in Adnan's handwriting across the top of his exchange with Aisha.
Right, that was done in October or November. It was 4 months before Hae was killed. It was it's a completely out of context. That note is 4 months old. It has nothing to do, unless you're going to make the argument that he was planning something like this 4 months in advance, after which they actually were back together. The homecoming dance happened after this. I mean, it was just like a kid bullshitting. I mean, and so that's not evidence. The evidence would be this. The evidence would be, we can say that somebody saw Adnan leaving with Hae. We can say that there was physical evidence linking Adnan to the crime. We can, there has to be evidence beyond an old note from, if you wanted something, God forbid, happen to my husband tomorrow, I'm positive you will find text messages from me to him saying, "I'm going to kill you because you forgot to do X, Y, Z." I mean, that's a really long stretch. It's not evidence of a murder.
I fear I'm losing my audience in the weeds because you and I are conversant about the case. You far more so, exponentially more so than I am, but I'm so intrigued with so many of the details. So let me drill down on one of them that I find troublesome with regard to your friend, okay?
This is the Book Club with Michael Smerconish podcast from SiriusXM. Listen to Michael live weekdays on POTUS, SiriusXM channel 124, and on the SXM app.
I'm so intrigued with so many of the details. So let me drill down on one of them that I find troublesome with regard to your friend, okay? Mm-hmm. Asia McClain. Asia McClain is the alibi witness. And yet Asia McClain is not someone that Adnan first references. It commonsensically seems to me, Rabia, that if my girlfriend, my on and off girlfriend, goes missing, first of all, the first thing I think I would do is I'd be calling her. I'm troubled by the fact, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that he never calls her from the time that she goes missing and then we know is murdered. But why would he not make the call unless he knew that she could not be in a position to answer that call because she was dead?
Well, how would you feel about the fact that her current boyfriend, who she had spent the evening with before and who she was supposed to see that night, never called her? I mean, what you have to understand is what was happening at the high school. The parent, Hae's family and police are calling a bunch of students saying, a bunch of kids saying, "Do you know where she is?" And everybody's like, "No, we don't know where she is." The next 5 days, there's no school. Nobody realizes until 5 days later when they go back on the 19th that Hae's actually still missing. Nobody has any idea. They all figure she's got a new boyfriend. She's been fighting with her mom. She's been spending the nights with him. She's probably there the night they called. He had no idea along with her friends, nobody was worried. Nobody thought about it because Hae is a very independent girl. She had a job. She had her own car. Nobody was thinking, oh, my God, nobody knows where Hae is, because they didn't hear from the family either. It wasn't until the following week when they went back to school that they're like, where's Hae? Is she still, like, nobody knows? And that's when they realized it had been 5 days, and that's when they started getting worried. But Hae had a current boyfriend who was supposed to see her that night, who she had spent the evening with the night before, and apparently had been on the phone until 3 a.m. And he finds out the police is looking for her. He doesn't even contact the police. He doesn't even call them back.
Do you believe he did it?
I believe his actions are incredibly suspicious, but I don't necessarily think. I think completely innocent people can do things that look really stupid and suspicious.
I mean, at the end of the book, there's a conclusion. Here is what I think happened. I'm not giving it away all for free. I want people to read it and draw their own conclusion. But as I read what you wrote, I said to myself that Rabia believes that it was the then boyfriend who did it, and Rabia doesn't want to say it because she doesn't want to incur the legal risk of going that far, but that's how I interpreted it. Am I mistaken?
Well, there really is no legal risk in me saying that my theory is that this person did it. There's no legal risk in it. But my thing is that I'm not.
Well, then who did it?
Word games. I'm saying no. But see, that's not how it works. It's not my job to say who did it. It's not Adnan's job. It is the state's job.
If I had
job, hold on, Michael. It's their job. They have existing DNA evidence. Test it. It's their job to reopen the investigation and do their job.
But Rabia, nothing would go further toward the exoneration of your good friend who sits behind bars today for a murder that you think. Let me finish. Let me finish. Nothing would go further toward the exoneration of your good friend than being able to assemble a case that shows that he didn't do it, X, Y, or Z did it.
You say that. I feel like you have very little experience with wrongful convictions. That's not how it works. In 90% of cases, the people who are wrongfully convicted cannot defend themselves. They cannot prove where they were. They don't know what happened. They've been gobsmacked, and that's the problem. Otherwise, people would not be wrongfully convicted if they could always prove who else did it. That's the state's job. The state holds the evidence. They also hold the power. I don't have the power as a private citizen to go and say, hand over that DNA evidence to me and subpoena Don's records, and I don't have the power to do that. The state does. And
okay, I disagree with you. I think that you've written a 400-page book, and
but how do I do that? How do I investigate what Don did on January 13th, 1999 as a private citizen? How am I supposed to do that without the power of subpoena? I don't have that power.
Before we run out of time, can we talk about Asia McClain?
Sure.
So Asia McClain is the quote-unquote alibi witness. And Asia McClain seemingly has said, according to the different individuals that you reference in the book, has said different things over a differing time period. Here's something that troubles me about your friend Adnan Syed. He is not buying into, it seems to me, her alibi or the alibi that perhaps she wishes to provide him. In other words, when he's interviewed by police, and there's a particular statement in the book where he recreates in his own handwriting where he was on the day in question, she's not a part of it. And what I started to say,
that wasn't given to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What I started to say before is, it seems to me that if an on-again, off-again girlfriend of mine disappeared on a particular day, and I realized there was a storm that weekend and that maybe he didn't know in real time when she went missing, but nevertheless, I think commonsensically one of the things that I would do is immediately replay the events of that day and where I was. And if I'd been at the library with someone who could put me in the library, I would sure as hell have that top of mind and tell that to the police when they question me. And that's not what he did.
Well, here's the thing. I think you're completely misunderstanding what was happening. Adnan had no idea he was a suspect or being investigated. He had no idea that there was ever even a shred of anybody thinking he had anything to do with it. That was the furthest thing from his mind. Every time he talked to the police, he thought he was going to try to provide them whatever information could help them find Hae. But there is nothing beyond that. If you're talking, he had a 6-hour interrogation with the police. There are no notes of that investigation. They did not record the investigation. They interrogated a juvenile without his parents. His attorneys are standing outside saying, stop the interrogation. His attorneys are here. They wouldn't do it. Tell me what those 6 hours of notes are. The note you're referencing is something months later he told his attorney. And he said to the attorney, and it's in the book, if you read it, you said you read it, where he says to the attorney, listen, what about Asia McClain? I don't know. And in the attorney notes, a couple of times in the file, it comes up, Asia McClain, he was with. So it's obvious that he brought it up, And when he was convicted and I went and got the affidavit from Asia McClain, he then wrote Gutierrez a letter and said, I'm again asking you to reopen this and include Asia McClain. What happened was when he was arrested 6 weeks after Hae Min was killed, he was like, it was a school day, and every day after school, I just went to track practice, and it was Ramadan, then I went to the mosque. So for that half an hour of time, he's like, I usually just wasted time at school until it's time for track practice. When he got Asia's letters, he's like, oh my God, yeah, I remember having that conversation. He sent the letters to his attorney. His attorney came back and said, you're wrong because she has her dates wrong. And all of a sudden, his certainty was gone. And he was like, crap, I thought that was the right day. And he just was confused. We're talking about a time when nobody has, where nobody's tweeting and nobody has smartphones and he doesn't have a calendar. It's just any other day. It's like somebody saying, what did you do for half an hour after lunch like 6 weeks ago? And you're thinking,
I'm making what I think to be a pretty reasonable conclusion, which is to say that if I were accused of committing a murder on a particular day, and if on that particular day, and if on that particular day I were in the company of someone who could exonerate me, I'd remember having been with them.
Why are you ignoring the fact that he raised it? What do you make of this?
I'm looking.
Asia McClain.
Okay.
I mean, why do you think those notes are in there? It says saw Asia McClain in library with boyfriend. It says it in his attorney notes.
Yeah, I'm looking. I did read the book. I'm on page 120 of the book. I'm looking at a handwritten account that he provided of his recollection of the school day, and I'm looking at your words as the author, which say, there is a marked difference in these notes from the ones in July. There is no mention of Asia. By this time, having given Gutierrez Asia's letters and repeatedly asking her to speak with her, Adnan had given up on Asia. I'd never give up on an alibi witness if I were serving time for a murder I didn't commit.
If you trust your attorney, who is like one of the most prominent attorneys in Baltimore, and she's saying to you, I checked out the alibi. I checked it out, and it didn't check out. All of a sudden, he's like, I got nothing. I don't know what to say. I don't know where I was. And that's why Deirdre Enright in Serial says, innocent clients are the ones who are the least helpful. They don't even know where to start, what to say. If they could be helpful, they wouldn't get convicted.
I guess my critique of the book is simply this, that you treat every question raised about his guilt as if it's preposterous, even respectfully, even in your tone with me. Where the book loses credibility is that you're the omnipotent one relative to the truth, that people can look at something as like a Rorschach test, and your view is to say, well, of course I know because I'm the one who knows him.
It doesn't matter that I know him. I had to learn about what happened in the case through other people's investigation. For me, it was enough that I knew him. But for other people, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for Susan Simpson, Colin Miller, Deirdre Enright, right now the National Innocence Project, Barry Scheck. We have Hogan and Levels. We have every lawyer who's ever been on this case, from his bail attorneys to this day. Talk to them. Doug Colbert, Chris Ford. They're like, absolutely, he was innocent. He was railroaded. Yesterday at the book launch, Doug Colbert was there, who represented him in 1999, and said, this is one of the grossest miscarriages of justice I've seen in my career. So it's not just me. And I do think these things are preposterous. And if you understood what really, I feel like, I don't know what to say. I feel like you are not understanding the fact that you have a 17-year-old kid who was like, I was with this girl, and his lawyer saying, no, you have the dates wrong. What is he supposed to do?
It's not that. I mean, it's just not that simple. I'm sorry. I'm paying close attention. I listened to the podcast. I read your book. I just can't come to terms with everything that you're offering, and the inconsistencies that I see that are in.
I'll tell you this. I'm going to tell you this, Michael. I'm going to tell you to be patient, because we're not done. The investigation's not over, and next year you're going to see an entire series done much further on the investigation, and maybe then you'll be convinced.
Look, we're not going to be able to resolve. Rabia, we're not going to be able to resolve anything other than you are a really good friend. How's that? You are a really good friend to this guy, and
I want to be a good friend, and I hope, and I don't want it to be that Non's a good guy.
And I hope that he is deserving. I don't know what went on here. I just know that by nature I'm a cynic, and I have a lot of questions. Not the least of which is the inherent, I think, contradiction of appealing and saying, well, we want the alibi witness brought in, and at the same time saying that you don't even let me finish. You don't even let me finish because you have such a certainty that you're right. My God, I'm a guy who took the time to read your book and is seeking to engage you on it. Let me just finish my thought. I see a contradiction in asserting to an appellate court we want Asia McClain to be able to be brought in and testify, and at the same time saying, and Gutierrez also let him down because she didn't let him plea. I mean, on one hand, you're saying he wanted to plead to a lesser offense, and on the other hand, you're saying, oh, and if only the alibi witness had been able to come in and show that he hadn't committed the murder.
I don't think you understand how these things work. If you talk to people who have practiced criminal defense, I mean, just yesterday, the New York Times printed an article that showed that 97% of federal crimes are pled out, that there are judges who sit for a decade and they only see one or two trials because there is such overwhelming power and force from the prosecutor that people are screwed. And when Adnan realized he didn't have Asia because his attorney saying there's nothing there, and he was being told by other inmates, you need to just look for a plea because you're in trouble because the state must have something. They must have a witness. He had no idea how to defend himself. And that's all it was. He was just
I'm offended by you saying repeatedly that I don't understand. I'm an attorney.
Like
Many who will interview you are not going to be attorneys.
I didn't understand.
Hey,
I am an attorney, and I didn't understand this.
How was Adnan able to listen to the program? I'm curious. I'm happy to have him listening. I'm just curious as to. Pardon me?
He cannot listen to this. He cannot listen to this program. I think he has. I don't believe he can listen to the radio program, but he does have access to TV.
You tweeted that he was disappointed to hear that I hadn't been accepting of his story. I was curious as to where that came from.
We were actually we were talking about how surreal it is for him to get news about his case from the media, and then it kind of turned into a conversation about it's really interesting. These are you and others are people he grew up with, journalists that he grew up even in prison watching. So he's like, it's really kind of interesting to listen to follow journalists and like them and listen to them and turn to them for what the news and then listen to them talk about you and your case. And then he brought you up, and he's like, do you know this guy? He's like, oh, I've loved him for years. And then I heard him talk about my case, and I was like, oh no, I'm gonna have to break up with him. And he was just kind of laughing about it, and I thought it was funny because I hadn't heard him talk about that before, and that's why I tweeted it.
Final question for Rabia Chaudry, and thanks for being gracious with your time. What's the current posture of the case?
He has been granted a new trial. His conviction has been vacated, but the state has filed an appeal, and so we have to wait and see if that appeal is upheld or not. But if it's not, then we should be ready to go for a new trial.
In the next trial, unlike the first two, one was abbreviated. Do you expect that he'll take the stand in his own defense?
I think he can if he wants to. It depends on what his attorneys advise him. In a lot of cases, attorneys don't advise it. But I do very much look forward to calling all kinds of other people to the stand, including
Right. I was just kind of surprised in the book. I wish there had been more discussion. I don't remember that there was any discussion about that decision and whether he would change it in the next go-round.
Yeah, no, when he was arrested, it was like the first time our community had ever encountered the criminal justice system. And him and his family and all of us were like, he should take the stand. He should take the stand. And Gutierrez was like, that's not how it works. I don't let my clients take the stand, on top of which the state has to prove their case. And so everybody said, okay, I mean, you're the expert, you're the lawyer. And that's all it was. And so even when he wanted to, he was told not to. And as a 17-year-old, all of us, we all listen to the lawyer.
Rabia, thanks so much for being here. The book is titled Adnan's Story. It has just come out, just yesterday, and I wish you good things.
Great. Thanks so much.
TC, as you well know, Kevin Urich was the prosecutor in this case, a guest on my program. I will make available the totality of the interview. There's just one aspect, I think, for parody I want the audience to hear and to hear right now. My recollection is that I said to him something like, was there anything unique about this case? Was there anything that stood out? Or was it just like many other cases that you prosecuted? Here's that one exchange that we had. Was the case of Adnan Syed one of your more memorable cases, or would you describe it as being fairly routine?
The case itself was very routine. It's memorable because the defense attorney was so hard-nosed and so aggressive.
Her name, Gutierrez, she's no longer with us, and that becomes a major part of the serial plot line. Let me get to that subject right now. Was she at the top of her game from your perspective when you were litigating this case against her?
Definitely. She was probably the most feared defense attorney in Baltimore City from the mid-'90s to the late '90s.
Because by the end of the serial 12 episodes, a listener could easily come away with the impression that Gutierrez, your opponent, was impaired, and that wounded the defense of this case.
She was at the top of her game during that period. She was taking all the high-profile cases. She was paid top dollar. She only took she had her she could pick and choose which cases she took at that time. The difficulty she ran into in the Syed case is that she had no true defense that she could put on. It was impossible, based on the evidence, for an alibi to be presented, because everything that they tried to do in terms of alibi, our evidence destroyed it. So she was reduced to trying to discredit the witnesses, and she spent 3 weeks trying to do that.
That's Kevin Urich. He is the prosecutor of Adnan Syed. Wish we had more time. Holy smokes. I just looked at the clock, and yet I could have gone on with Rabia for much longer than that.
Hear more of Michael Smerconish on SiriusXM's POTUS Channel 124.
Live weekdays from 9 a.m. to noon East, or anytime on the SiriusXM app.
Connect with Michael on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and at Smerconish.com. Book Club with Michael Smerconish. New episodes drop Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.